I'm Dr. Pedram Shojai, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from Lao Tzu and says, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Dr. Pedram Shojai is a former Taoist monk, doctor of Oriental medicine, and Qigong master. As founder of The Urban Monk, he helps people to reclaim their focus, vitality, and purpose in the fast-paced modern world. Pedram is also a New York Times best-selling author with 8 books translated into more than 30 languages. As a filmmaker, he has produced powerful documentaries that are changing the conversation around conscious health and healing. Most importantly, he's a proud husband and father. In this episode, we're going to talk about why we resist change even when we say we want it, the truth about anxiety, burnout, and symptom chasing, daily habits that actually make a difference, and how you can start living your best life today. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day. Share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with the urban monk, Dr. Pedram Shojai. Pedram, great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Well, you have been exposed to so many different philosophies and experiences over the years. Do you have a bit of an elevator pitch of how you sum up your life philosophy today?
Yeah, I think it's a semi-conscious stumble is probably the best we can do, right? You move forward, you make a couple of mistakes, you look in the rearview mirror, you correct it, and you just adjust and go.
Well, that's good for all of us to hear that as well. You know, as I have interviewed people of increasing influence and people who've done some really cool things, I haven't met a single person who has professed to having their entire life figured out. Everyone's trying to learn. You know, we're all trying to adjust on the fly and do the best we can with all of the different complexities that life throws at us.
Yeah, I've learned the hard way that if someone is coming from an exalted state, run.
I love that. And is there a story of struggle or success from when you were younger that helped put you on the path you ultimately went down?
I mean, 3 years old, everything we knew to be true blew up in the Iranian Revolution. We got out with the shirts on our backs. I had family killed. Start over. Took my dad 40 years. Some would argue he's still not over it, to get over, the loss and all the things that, they took from him and the victimhood and all that. And I grew up under the umbrella of all of that, saying, work hard, be a doctor, make it. And it invigorates you to challenge yourself to grow. It invigorates you to do something for your parents. And it also helps temper you in a world that doesn't care about your story. And so you have to carry your story, but also understand that none of it matters. Your next best decision is in front of you. What do you make?
So were you pushed into the sort of medical healthcare world, like going on to study medicine? Like, is that something your parents wanted you to do, or did you just happen to align with the track that you ended up on? A lot of people who have parents, especially if it's an immigrant family that doesn't want to waste the opportunity for their kids, they can get pushed into a career that later on they're 40, 50 years old, being like, wow, I've been living someone else's life all this time, so I've never been truly happy. But it sounds like you might have, I know you had your different challenges over the years, but were you really connected with that path?
Yeah, I mean, that was a script. Doctor, lawyer, engineer. That's what immigrant families do at that time. Now it's like, I don't know, AI, robot, maintenance guy. Like, I don't know what the hell the kids are going to do now. But when I was coming through as doctor, I was number 1 in my high school. I went straight to UCLA. I was pre-med. And fortunately for this guy, my angels struck early. And I was mentoring under just a miserable doctor who was just not a good person and all these things. And it just made me pump my brakes and say, wow, I'm looking down the barrel of following this guy's life. And it opened my eyes to Taoism and Kung Fu and all sorts of weird Jedi stuff that I didn't even know about. And after having studied that and become a monk and all that, ironically, and maybe partially just to, appease my immigrant parents, I went back and took a doctorate in Oriental medicine because it so set matched the lifestyles and the philosophies and things that I had learned. And so I ended up becoming a doctor person, but not one of those doctor people, because those doctor people are at the top of the food chain and what they say goes if you want to keep your diabetes. And so I had to kind of come up through this kind of rebel alliance, healthcare alt world. and find my way and be like, no, this is right. Right. And so it's like the scrappy immigrant story who still had to come in through the side door and work hard to get there.
Did that help set your belief in what a good mentor should be?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It really elucidated to me that there are society-wide hypnotic trances. Oh, well, I work for Morgan Stanley, like right now I was telling you offline, I'm in Laguna Beach, and it's like, bro, I could care less what watch you're wearing, right? Like the success metrics and the KPIs of people that are like following an algorithm. And it's like, well, I followed these steps and now I'm here. So therefore society says I'm better than you. And all that stuff comes into question for a family whose father was here and then collapsed. And you see it happen over and over again. Yet if I just follow the script, everything's going to be good. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be successful. And so like once that narrative gets upset and you start looking at it from the side, you realize how fickle the storytelling truly is. And then the question is, who am I? And who do I choose to be? Which is a much more interesting conversation than talking to people who've already decided who they are and hang out with people in the echelon of people they're allowed to hang out with, right? There's the hypnotic trance boredom, and then there's all these like weirdos that are asking weird questions and waking up to stuff.
Where does someone begin? Is it, or what's more important? Is it who am I or who do I choose to be?
Who am I think is the number one question we should all ask ourselves every single day. And the more important question behind that question is who just asked that question. And so who am I don't know if we'll ever have an answer. It's just an eternal honeypot of exploration that we continue to dig in. Because as you start to really deconstruct the who am I, you start running into all these clunky places of definitions of self and places where we've created armor to help protect, a child who, experienced a wound or a traumatic event. So all these edifices, all these bricks in the wall, if you will, that we've created in our self-definition, as you start to deconstruct that, it's terrifying, but it's the only game in town.
Is that forced? Like, are those questions prompted through going through some type of significant adverse experience? Or is it through, cool, I'm perhaps not as happy as I could be? Or is it something like every single day, let me have a think with, when you're waking up in the morning or you're outside getting a bit of sunshine doing a journal? Like, when is the best time to sort of force that process?
It all depends on what God or reality serves up to you, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes for some people, lightning strikes. For some people, it's like, wow, I just don't really feel like my life has much meaning and it's not really moving. Maybe I ask these questions. Maybe I build some sort of hygiene and kind of whittle away at this. And sometimes, an earthquake happens and you don't have a choice. You're looking at everything right then and there.
Yeah. Life has a way of presenting you with circumstances that you could never imagine.
Yeah. I can't predict the timing. I just know that it's coming.
And what about Eastern philosophies and exercises and practices? When did they first come onto your radar for you actually as a student?
Yeah, I was a pre-med UCLA studying with this famous doctor and was like, man, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. In these dead hospital corridors. And it's a very specific account where I was like, man, Mrs. Jones is in room 3, Mr. So-and-so is in room 4, and every single one of the charts says morphine drip this much, this PR, and it was all just giving people morphine. And I went and asked the attending doctor, I'm like, hey, so what are we going to do about this other than just give them drugs? And this is why he was an angel. He looked straight at me and said, kid, I don't think you understand what we're doing here. We're just hoping Mrs. Jones dies of natural causes before we kill her. Like, we got nothing. And so here I am, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, busting my ass to get straight A's to study medical science. And this guru is like, oh man, we don't really have anything that helps this lady. I'm like, what am I doing here? So the next week I'm like, well, there's a Tai Chi class out in the lawn with some Japanese guy who's got a nice smile, right? And this old kid, and all of a sudden I'm like, what is this? I feel like my hands are tingling. And so being a scientist, I'm like, well, I just experienced that. I don't believe in chi. What is this? I feel chi. And that was it. It became this rabbit hole where I was like, what else you got? And I just kept studying and asked God, and we, weird relationship with God, because in the name of God, half my family was killed in this revolution. And my parents were like, that's not God. But I asked God, I was like, look, dude, if you're there, I could sure use a hint right now. And something that wasn't supposed to happen happened. And to this day, I can't explain it, but a book fell out of a bookshelf, like, yards ahead of me. And I'm like, come on. And literally, I thought someone was listening to my thoughts, and I'm like looking for the friend that was messing with me because, of course, they could hear my thoughts. No one's there. It was a book on Taoism. And I'm like, well, I've heard of Taoism. And I read the book cover to cover that night. And then the following week, I found a Kung Fu studio that was a Taoist Kung Fu studio. And the master, on the other side of the school is doing stuff. And my buddy, Jason, I dragged a buddy with me because it was all too weird. And he walks right through the whole school, right by my buddy, Jason. It's like, I've been expecting you. And I'm like, man, this is weird. But sure, what do you got? Right? Like, I asked God for a clue, and here we are. And 30 hours a week of Kung Fu, Tai Chi, Xing Yi, Bagua, all sorts of crazy stuff later, I ended up becoming a monk. I ended up studying with his master and that whole lineage. I ended up going to India and Nepal. I studied with the Dalai Lama. And so when I'm in, I'm in. I was like, let's go. What is this stuff?
What do you learn from a Kung Fu master?
Literal translation of Kung Fu is hard work. So the hard work is facing yourself. So when you're in these I had to do 6 months of like deep, and I've been in the martial arts my whole life as a kid, 6 months of deep stance training before I was allowed to test for a white belt. And you're just sitting there breathing and suffering, and like you feel the pain, and you're supposed to just observe it. And so what? It's just a sensation, right? And so you learn very quickly that your limitations are part of your perception and your narrow definition of self. And then you realize that life is hard work. And if you get better at your Kung Fu, you get better at your life, you get better at everything you basically assert yourself in, you start to sharpen the knife and you just get better at all things. And so it became an operating system for me. And the martial arts really, I think, are one of the most pure forms of that unfortunately, since the pandemic and all this, martial arts studios are going out of business. It's like, oh no, don't lose this. It's like a library burning down. The discipline and the agency that a young person, you start at any age, the age that you start is the first day of the rest of your life. And then you get better and better at being in the room, being focused, being aware, and facing your limitations. And I can't think of any situation in life that can't use all of that.
Well said. And what was your relationship with time like during all that? Like, I imagine you can't be sitting there checking your watch, to find out how much longer have I got left of this? Like, what was your relationship with time?
Well, growing up in the West, we all live in compressed time, scarce time. And so to find spaciousness in time has a lot of unlearning and a lot of unpacking that we have to get into. I was taking 24 units at UCLA, and my folks are like, you're crazy. What are you doing? I'm like, I'll get straight A's. So I did. And so here I am just banging away at school because I'm a man of my word. This is what I told you I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And so here we go. There's no time outside of the training and the classes to study. So what does this young man have to learn is you don't just sit there in the lecture and look at girls. You don't sit there in the lecture and like goof off and then go home and be like, what did that guy say? I'm going to study. I'm like the guy with the textbooks in the lecture hall. As he's lecturing, I'm just like, this is my only chance to hear this, learn this, absorb this before the midterms. And so I learned to become hyper present in that moment because that was the only chance I had to hear that, pull it in, and be able to repeat it somewhere on a test. And so as I start, and that's the Qigong and the Kung Fu training. It's like, if you're training to be present, it should apply to every aspect of your life. Full stop, end of sentence. And so then I started, taking this Kung Fu operating system, taking it into the lecture hall, taking it everywhere. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, how incredibly inefficient have I been in these first 19 years? And where else am I just like sleepwalking where I could wake up and reabsorb my life force and be more engaged in things that matter?
I love through presence, you sort of found the hack to ultimate efficiency at the same time.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Good for the economy, right?
Yeah.
It's just this weird dichotomy of how much, like if we trade our heartbeats, our time and our energy for money, And most people work for an hourly, a monthly, an annual salary. Like your time is associated with your value to society, and there's a monetary value to that. How much of that time is optimized for the efficiency, the value you bring for society? And how much of that time do you waste thinking about stupid things, watching TV, calling the guys from high school, whatever it is, right? And not to say you shouldn't have relationships with the guys from high school, but they should be meaningful conversations that move your life and their life forward, not just to, I got the dialies because I'm in traffic, right? Like I don't waste time. And in learning that, I learned to then maximize my time for, I've made dozens of films, I've written all these books. Like I'm actually good at doing stuff, but I'm also still relaxed because I learned how to do that.
A lot of your work is about the importance of focus. Like when did you realize, what happened in your life that made you realize that focus was so important?
The metaphor that I like to use is if you had a garden and you had room for maybe 5 plants in that garden, your health, your family, your career, your passions, fill in the gap, whatever that is, right? And each of those took a certain amount of water in the form of time, money, and energy that you had to drip into those on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to sustain. And that was where you said your priorities are. Anything else that's getting watered is a weed. And what I realized is this is the human, I didn't make any of this up. The Buddha called us hungry ghosts thousands of years ago. Like our attention tends to dissipate into Maya, into the illusory universe. And now the illusory universe is doing a bear hug through social media and all of these ways of grabbing us through the attention economy. And so if I can't focus my attention on what I said are my life's priorities, Toyota's going to tell me I need that truck. My wife's going to say I need this purse. It's just we're getting sucked out of our own priorities by what the advertisers and the politicians and everyone is trying to get our attention, because our eyeballs and our attention is our energy. So we live in a parasitic universe. And if you don't fold your attention back into your life, your priorities, your health, your objectives, you're never going to live a fulfilling life, because you're dripping that life force into the wants and the desires of others that are gaming your attention.
Which ends up in just endless consumerism. Just credit card debt we're seeing now, yeah.
Yeah, credit card debt. And also just these alternative realities that are now starting to become fabricated with the help of AI and, shady marketers that literally create a worldview that you seem to keep clicking on, and then set matching that with monetization and advertisement and all these things. So you're literally just being pulled parasitically into an alt universe where your belief systems, your news, everything is just fabricated and or distorted to keep you parked right where you were and not paying attention to what actually happened in the room that you were sitting in. And so we're falling asleep. We're turning into zombies. And so that became a big part of my study, is like, oh my God, everyone's like, it's soul sucking. And you could see people are just not in their bodies. They're not empowered anymore to be lively humans that spark up a room. And as an abbot of a Taoist lineage, as a hospitaller knight, as a physician, as a dad, as a citizen, I feel like it's my responsibility to speak up. Like, yo, snap out of it. Snap out of it. I'd like some people back, right?
And you mentioned, you've lived 1,000 lives. You mentioned some of them there. Was there a common thread from all of those that you've identified?
All of the things that I just mentioned are also just words, right? And they're part of this identity soup that is this Brazilian shanty town that gets assembled to make sense of a reality that is way bigger and scarier than we are willing to admit. The quantum coherence of the microtubules inside of the collagen in my glial cells have access to all information without time and space limitation across this entire universe. Ouch. Right. And so then I'm like, okay, well, this is Dr. Guy wearing, shoes today. Like I have to be able to, Carlos Castaneda called it the island of the tonal. So there's the great Nawal, which is like just too hard to grasp. It's infinite. So then we have to create the storefront so that we can function in society and like make sure my zipper's up and, hello, ma'am, and have good manners and morals and ethics and stay in your lane. So there a lot of this stuff we need so that we can coexist and not crash and kill each other. But everything should go into the realm of questioning and then come back out. And I think repeatedly as we rinse and repeat so that we don't find ourselves becoming mental slaves, because that tends to be the downward pull.
And what does it mean to be an urban monk? And how important was it having such a, it's obviously a very clever name. How important was that in you being able to get out there and to get your message out there and have the impact you want to have?
That was a painful growth edge for me, because I put it to you that it's a lot easier being enlightened sitting in some ashram in the Himalayas. All I'm doing is focusing on my navel, and the work is hard, but I have this whole battery of problems that other people have that I have let go of so that I could focus on my spiritual upbringing. And when I was actually in India, I was in an ashram, and I'm like, man, I don't get it. Like this, I don't feel like I belong here. And he's like, you don't belong here. You speak good English. You're educated. You've learned what you need to learn here. Get out, go back to your world. And you're not to live the path of an ascetic. You are a householder. Go get a career, take on a family, and live the life of a householder, and then translate what you've learned here. Man, that was rough. That's like, you got to calculate your trajectory coming in from orbit, because it's, in early days, Dr. Pedram was a little preachy, right? Like, oh, well, you obviously don't have your health together because you don't meditate for 3 hours a day. Ha ha, And it was this thing where it's like you coming from this high on the horse place from an ascetic lineage that does not translate into the lives of the people I was trying to help. And then I said, look, if I'm now committed to being a householder and helping my fellow humans, where's the translational gap? And so there was a couple really rough years of just like, oh, wow, okay.
Probably also you trying to figure out like you don't fit in either setting.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I was standing between two worlds, and I'm like, okay, so how does one become an urban monk? Oh, you don't have 3 hours to do yoga. You don't have 90 minutes. So here's how you take 5 breaths in between your meetings. I guess the best way I could describe it is when I first came out of the monastery, I would stand on the top of the hill and be like, come to me, people, right? Instead of just walking down into the marketplace and handing out flowers and smiling at people and blessing them. And then they're like, who's that guy? Right? Can you help me? And you're like, yeah, you should probably breathe. Right. And so it was a radical reorientation, and I think a misread of all the scripture between ascetic and householder lineages that had to burn its way through this poor guy. Lost my hair in the process. Right. But then I was like, okay, I get it. You cannot have a householder live an ascetic lifestyle, and the ones that do are stressed out because they feel guilty that they didn't do all this other crap all day. And they don't have time for the crap that they already signed up for, let alone the ascetic lineages.
We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. There's the old expression, the grass is always greener. I feel like it's one of the truest things there is. How do you feel about that? The grass is always greener.
The difference between vertically feeding and horizontally feeding becomes really like a point of contrast that I think I don't talk about enough, is when you learn to tap into your own vital energy and drink from the top of your head into your pineal gland and from your root, just allow heaven and earth to bathe you and fill your heart with gratitude and fill yourself with the spiritual juju that many of these traditions talk about. You are full, you are whole, you are complete, you are happy, and you are fulfilled. If you think that James Whittaker has what I need, if you think that Bobby over there has got the deal that I need, or, I need to know that set of friends because they're going to get me ahead, or they're on private jets and you start trying to get that fulfillment horizontally, you are in the world of aversions and cravings, you're in the world of suffering, and the grass is going to be greener somewhere.
Mm. You know, in a world of just modern living standard, the standards of living have increased so much. We have healthcare, we've got all these different things, so trillions of dollars being allocated to these things, but people are unhappier than ever. They're unhealthier than ever. What are the biggest problems that you see in the world that we're in today?
I used to think that there was just a bunch of top-heavy systems that had inertia that were inefficient, and I was going to go solve these problems. You know, I got into corporate wellness, and I was consulting 1,400 companies, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like, draw your sword, let's go fix this. And then I'd get into these rooms and be like, oh, these guys aren't interested in fixing anything. These guys are paid. And so I have, you know, I'm turning 50 this summer, and yeah, I got to say, in the last 6-7 years, I've really turned a corner to be like, oh man, no, they actually did build a Death Star, and the big food, big ag, big chemistry, big drug, big healthcare industries have zero vested interest in keeping people healthy, because sickness is now 25% of our GDP. They've created a dark economy that feeds on human suffering. Ew. I didn't want to believe that. And now there's enough evidence that's put in front of me on a weekly basis where I'm like, ew, that is not right livelihood. That is gross.
Is that big pharma controlling things like everything from the research studies right through to at the university level to what people are being, you know, aspiring doctors are being taught? I often think about this stuff as well, but it's hard to believe that every single one of these people is coming out there being like, yes, we want to keep our patients sick. You know, it's more of the system that controls these different things that changes someone's narrative and their belief versus the individual person who, at the start, they're well-intentioned, but based on the research that they are trained on and the model that they are part of, they just fall into that sick model.
100%. I know hundreds of very well-intentioned individuals who've studied and dedicated their lives to helping people that are trapped in a thought control system that subtly manipulates where their eyeballs are allowed to look and what they're allowed to say and what they're allowed to believe. Sapolsky did some great work on this where he talked about, you know, kind of neural networks forming, and you do it with like just basic amoeba and bacteria, and you will see them start to just kind of develop and create tracks and move towards where there's food. Or honeybees, they'll start to develop these tracks to where the pollen is. And so, okay, I created this thing called the mighty dollar. I back it up with aircraft carriers and tie petroleum, you know, trade to it. Now, this is the mighty dollar. And now my buddies, you know, in all these different places control the mighty dollar. And we say, here, research guy, here's where the money is. And guess what? He's got a family to feed too. He has to fund his research. And so it's very easy to manipulate hungry animals with bread. And so the whole system is actually really genius in how it's orchestrated to just use the money to drive the outcomes. I'll give you an example. NF-kappa B, epigenetic pathway that is kind of the mother lode. If I developed a drug that helped modulate NF-kappa B in a therapeutic way, what that would do is it would bring down systemic inflammation by orders of magnitude and basically solve heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, like so many of the chronic illness that is making up to 25% of the GDP. And I'd probably get a Nobel Prize and I'd be a gajillionaire, but that is not easy because it's a genetic pathway. But I can show you reams of data showing that prayer, meditation, mind-body practice, spiritual work, and all of this stuff that I've dedicated my life to absolutely pulls on that lever, manipulates NF-kappa B in a positive way, brings down systemic inflammation, and radically changes your life. You just can't patent it. So nobody is following this research except, you know, so a few smart doctors that are like, what? Look at this. Why? Follow the money. Follow the money. And so we already know how to make America healthy. We know how to do all this, but the money is behind the drugs and the consumption and the monetization, the productization of sickness, because health is terrible for the economy, right? It might be better for, you know, effectively GDP later because we're, you know, actually doing things that are competitive again. But these parasites, these societal parasites, have really brought down this narrative to a place where it's like an animal farm. I didn't used to believe this. I've seen enough evidence to say, ugh, How gross. How gross.
Even when you look at pharmaceutical advertising, the percentage that makes up from massive media organizations that are then going to be, at least a little bit conflicted in terms of the information that they put out there if it contradicts with their primary source of revenue.
Nobody wants to cut their money. They've got shareholders. And so, I did 2018, I don't know when I did this. I did a film on conscious capitalism. I followed all these, Whole Foods and all these kind of big conscious capital companies. I mean, like, can we use business for good? And the answer is yes. But overwhelmingly, there is no accountability from shareholders. They just have to show profit. And so the entire game is set up to just maximize profit at any cost to society, unless, you get a slap on the wrist. And so there has to be a lot of systemic change. I'm not the guy to do that. I'm the guy to wake up one guy at a time, one mom at a time, and just say, look, wake up, snap out of it. Because I think the actual system itself is just so twisted that people have to snap out of it and then start finding health instead of chasing healthcare.
You mentioned meditation there. Is there a best meditation practice for most people?
No. I think there's a best meditation practice for you. And I think that there are people that should never get in an ice bath and people that should get in an ice bath 3 times a week. I think that us understanding our own genetic disposition, our own adrenal insufficiency, our own microbiome, our own personalized signature on what the emerging literature is talking about is neuroception. Neuroception is, does my body feel safe right now? I'm either, in a wartime economy, building bombs and jet fighters, or I'm in a peacetime economy, taking care of my people and the crops and school books. And the body doesn't have an easy way of switching between the two. And so most of us are living in a wartime economy, which means we don't feel safe, which means we can't heal, which means we can't sleep, which means we have subtle anxiety, which means we can't absorb our nutrients the same way. And so for me, the safety signals and the neuroception become a really big part of this bringing health back equation. And I've been in the functional medicine world for a long time. And what's funny is in the last 5-6 years, I'm like, oh my God, bring back the monk. Because this is the stuff that actually will turn the dial hard and get people where they need to be versus saying, here's $3,000 worth of supplements. I don't know why it didn't work.
All roads lead to supplements, don't they, for these, for these companies?
Well, yeah, and that's a whole other can of worms. But pharma did such a great job of productizing their stuff for various symptoms that the supplement companies, because they got to eat, followed the same business model and said, oh no, don't take Xanax, take St. John's wort. But it's still a pill for an ill model with a slightly better, less harmful outcome maybe. But why do you have the anxiety? Oh, you have poor boundaries and you're fighting with your spouse all the time. Oh, you have mold in your house. Get to the root cause and stop trying to throw remedial Band-Aids at the situation. It's just the form of medicine is wrong. It's primitive.
So I want to get really crystal clear on this. So you're saying that medicine for the right circumstances, if you really look at the individual for who they are, but you need to factor in all of these different things like environmental factors. You need to focus on what perhaps they're going through. If there's a traumatic experience they have, maybe if they're getting divorced, maybe they need to get more exercise, gratitude practice, sunshine, all of these different things. And once those things have been factored in, if nothing else helps, then cool, we've got some of these medical options, prescription drugs to be able to see how that works.
100%. Look,
and for the short term, not like have this pill forever.
Yeah. Like, listen, if you need nitroglycerin to like keep your heart ticking, by all means. But if you do, let's just say you just had a whole battery of like, so like that was, 9 podcasts in one, right? Like all the stuff, right? Go, jump in a sauna, go get some sun, this, right? And so people will be like, oh, I tried all that and I felt better. And then I went back to my life. And so I think there's also a part of us not realizing that that's an operating system. That lifestyle is an everyday lifestyle, not a remedial sprint back to being symptom free so that you can go back to a different lifestyle. And so I think that a lot of people they haven't crossed the chasm yet to realize that the elixir is healthy living every day. right? The sauna isn't going to cure your diabetes. The sauna is part of your daily hygiene.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. How do you feel about things like Ozempic?
If you're morbidly obese and you're at a high risk of having a fatality event, dropping that weight can save your life. No one can argue with that. Full stop. Next sentence. What happens when you're 40 pounds overweight, you take Ozempic, you drop the 40 pounds, and then you go to your doctor and he says, well, you obviously don't need this drug anymore. Now you should probably exercise and eat well. I can't write a script for this. You're right back where you started. And that's the problem I have with that entire deal is like, look, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you and the food you put in your mouth and the choices that you make. So you can kick the can down the street and have saggy skin and all the other crap that comes with it and maybe just die, right? Like there's all sorts of side effects outside of the $1,200 a month you're paying these drug companies to do the thing that you should have done anyways. For most people, there's some people that really have a problem. And you know what? Great. I love the fact that there's a drug for you. But the use case for a lot of my well-to-do friends that take Ozempic before the wedding party next month and all that is just not there. And the data is now suggesting that it's more harmful than good in what I've seen. And I honestly think that at the end of the day, start taking long walks, take out the processed foods, get this, all the stuff that we know. Ozempic isn't some sort of like silver bullet to just supersede and say, well, you don't have to do any of that crap anymore. Just go back to, fall asleep, go back to sleep.
Plus the big problem is that a lot of patients want a pill. There have been times when it's like, I'm not feeling well. Give me something that can help me get out of this state.
Yeah, but that's Pavlovian conditioning is I come to you and like if you go to Hispanic communities, they need a shot because that's what they believe works. So there's this whole thing around my nocebo and placebo effects and then the placebo being like, well, a good doctor gives me a shot because I could take a pill myself. And so we've been trained to think that you have to get a prescription or else the doctor didn't do anything for you. Who did the medical education for that doctor, the university that trained that doctor, and then the continuing education that doctor is forced to go to, right? And that, to me, is where all eyes should go, is follow the money, right? And the money is going into the coffers of these people that are selling the pills. And you're like, well, my insurance covers it. You're paying $2,000 a month for your insurance. Why do you think it costs so much? Right? It's mind-blowing to me how we've been duped into this system of playing, I don't know, I'm always broke, right? Where's your money going?
Earlier you mentioned anxiety. What do you feel is the root cause of anxiety and how should people overcome that?
I'm actually starting to truly fold back on this. The next book I'm writing is about the multiple arrays of perception that we have cut out thanks to TikTok and all these other, places that pull our attention out. But we have exteroception, which is our eyes, our hearing, our senses, the ones that we know, the five senses. We have our interoception, which is my heart rate, my breath, my respiratory rate, my gut, my vagal nerve, tone, and all these things that I can feel if I close my eyes, right? Then I have my proprioception, right? I have my neuroception, my safety signals. There's about 9 of these. And the research I've been really, really interested in is a lot of these meditation practices and yoga practices and all these things that are like, oh yeah, this is good for you. They hold multiple perceptual arrays at the same time in awareness. And that activates the anterior cingulate cortex and it helps us modulate the default mode network. So without dorking out, the more of these we can layer in, like, okay, so I'm meditating. So I should be, aware of my spine. I should breathe down to my belly. I should watch the breath. I should listen to the breath. I should feel my hands. That's 4 or 5, maybe 6 of those. Equilibrium is also one of them, right? So where's my head posture, right? Oh, this is why I tuck my neck and I put the tongue on the roof of my mouth. And the more of these that I could hold at the same time, or at least kind of round robin and keep bringing back, the more it seems to turn the lights on. And as we do so, we become more self-aware and we become more capable of being like, okay, well, that's a sensation and I could just observe it and not freak out over it and it'll pass. So this is the essence of Vipassana meditation. It's the essence of a lot of these traditions. And the more I read about neuroception, the more it just intrigues me because we do have this animal sense of safety signaling. I walk into a room, there's some new carpet smell. I'm like, oh, I don't feel good in here. Why? My body is saying this is poison, but I don't speak English, but I do speak anxiety. Get out, you dumb monkey. Oh, that guy is kind of creepy. I don't know why I got in the elevator with him, right? There's whole books written about this. It's like, well, your body was trying to tell you, your neuroception was trying to tell you that's a sexual predator and you didn't listen, right? And so where else do we find this? We find this, to me, a big part of this is gut barrier permeability. People who have sensitivities to foods, like, yeah, well, when I eat dairy, it kind of messes me up, but it's fine. I mean, I love my pizza. No. Because that tear in your gut lining is allowing gram-negative bacteria to put lipopolysaccharides into your bloodstream. What happens? Your body's like, I'm under attack. Raise the alarm. Tell this monkey to stop throwing cheese down here. And you're like, oh, I don't know. I feel a little anxious. Let me give me a Diet Coke. Instead of like, what is my body trying to tell me? And so these subtle signals coming from your gut lining, coming from your olfactory nerve, coming from like too much light coming, and I don't feel good, it's too bright in this studio, or whatever it is, if you learn to listen and modulate, you'll realize that a lot of the anxiety, this baseline anxiety, is your body trying to tell you something, and it has to keep telling you louder and louder, because as a blunt instrument, you're not listening. Hello, humans, right? That's where we live. And so that has become a fascinating line of inquiry for me. And I'm just deep in the reams of research on it where I'm like, oh my God, it's right there.
That's really interesting, especially it ties into presence, like you mentioned earlier, and breath. It sounds like it's such a big one, not necessarily for emotional regulation, but even at a more primitive, basic level. Is breath for meditation is the biggest thing. Like none of that other stuff seems to really work unless you've got the breath figured out. Is that right?
Think about the cadence of breath and think about the critical kind of central role it plays. Go without food for 30 days and go out without water for a week. Try holding your breath for more than, I don't know, I met the world record holder. It was like 26 minutes or something insane. But even him on minute 27 is dead, right? And so breath is something that ties us into our interoception every minute. And it's the easiest way to anchor ourselves back into truly being in our bodies. And breath is something that is so easily accessible. If you could just focus on your breath, fold your attention basically back on watching your breath, feeling your breath, and hearing the silent breath going down to your lower abdomen, just that alone will radically change everything that happens in your life. And you might have an experience of that for 10 seconds and be like, oh, that was cool. No, keep watering that part of your internal garden every day for 100 days, build a relationship with it. And then it's the gift that keeps on giving. The problem is TikTok's calling.
How bad do you want it, I guess? A lot of people, which is leads me to my next question. Why do so many people sabotage their own growth and healing?
I think it's easier in our culture with all of the myriad options that are put in front of us on a daily basis to continue to anesthetize than to feel even a remote amount of pain that comes with growth and edge walk.
So it's an attention problem in many ways today.
Yes. It's an attention problem. And it's also, look, there's a reason why they put toys and sugar cereal for children. It's a lot easier to give people what they want than show them what they need. And so the entire ecosystem of advertising and food and comfort and drugs and, oh no, you don't have to stretch. I got Advil. Right. And so our entire culture is assembled around anesthetizing and saying, it's okay, just keep going. Instead of like, why is my hip sore? Right. That's a much better question than where's the Advil? Now, I'm not saying you don't need Advil sometimes in life, but I'm saying that's a lower order remedial solution. And Advil could be Quaaludes, Advil could be marijuana, Advil could be tequila, Advil could be cheating on your wife, right? There's a lot of ways people anesthetize and don't feel what they're supposed to be feeling in that moment.
What about someone who wants to change a spouse or loved one who might be on a bit of a destructive path?
That's tough. You have to lead by example. All the research says, you go nag at them, it's just going to be fights, right? You have to lead by example. You have to lovingly hold space and allow them to come to conclusions on their own by seeing you doing it differently. But if you lecture, if you nag, if you try to change someone, they're just going to fight you back.
And that can take months. Yeah,
maybe your whole life, right?
Yeah. Interesting. As a parent, I'm so interested in your philosophy on parenting based on your very expansive view of the world. Do you have a specific parenting approach, or is there anything that we've spoken about today that you take into your role as a parent?
The hardest job I've ever had is being a parent. And my kids are like something else, right? The other day I was, I work from home and the doorbell's ringing and I'm like, man, there's a sign that says leave it, right? So I open the door, it's a pizza guy. He's like, you order pizza? I'm like, no, man, I didn't order a pizza. He's like, well, someone ordered a pizza. I'm like, I am gluten-free and dairy-free. I'm telling you, I did not order a pizza. And he's like, well, Soul Shojai? I'm like, son of a... I'm like, that's a 10-year-old in an elementary school 3 miles up the road. Like, he's like, I don't know. He called and ordered a pizza. I'm like, how did he pay for it? He's like, oh, no, he didn't. You owe me $37. So I'm like, touche. Good story. Thank you, bud. Right. But like these guys are just expansive and like they want to like grow and it's my job not to clip his wings, but also give him bumpers and rules. And
they don't mind pushing the boundaries or testing the boundaries either, do they?
No, we did the same. Right. Yeah. And so
that's why it's so hard to be mad. If it's something that's fun or a little bit cheeky, I have a hard time coming down with some harsh discipline around that. I'm more like, look, you understand this. And my kids are a lot younger than yours, but yeah.
It's hard because I also see really, really bad examples of people who did it wrong in my family and out. And I'm much more of a kung fu big dog type of parent. And my wife's more of an enabler. And so there's a lot of squishy space in there that we try to reconcile, right? Like this morning, he was sitting in the front seat. I'm like, wait a minute. California state law says he's not allowed to sit shotgun. And she's like, no, he's 4'9" now. He can sit shotgun. I'm like, buddy, are you 4'9"? He's like, I think so. I'm like, we're going to measure you. And if that's the case, then dad's going to let go of this. Right. But I thought this was our line. You don't sit shotgun until you're 4'9". And so that's, life in a marriage. But I want them to test boundaries. I want them to make inexpensive mistakes and grow and learn in low stakes scenarios and not crash their motorcycle, right? I want them to learn things. And so for me, I spend a lot of time in nature. Both my kids are elite ski racers. Like they are very, very hardworking kids who, from the very, and I love this. Like we lived in Park City and my wife got caught carrying my daughter's skis and they were like, Sophia, put down the skis, hike to that chair and back. I never want to see your mom carrying your stuff again. I was like, you are hired. I love you, right? Stop enabling them. Make them carry their own stuff. Make them become strong humans because I might die in a car crash on my way back from this thing today, right? Like I cannot guarantee that I'm going to be around. What I can do is upload an operating system that makes them good, ethical, moral people that learn to solve problems and see life's challenges as a problem solver instead of like, oh, it's like math. Right? Like, oh my God, I have all these math problems. You're like, yeah, it's called math. Solve the problems and you get better at solving those problems. And then you can take higher order problems and you become better at being a problem solver. So, okay, what is this? How do we create an operating system for you to interface with whatever this thing is in front of us to learn, to grow, to do the right thing, to be an ethical, moral person, and to blossom coming on the other side of this? And I'm telling you, it's the hardest job in the world, but it is by far much more fulfilling. And to me, it's an even tougher spiritual school than any school I went to. And I studied with the Dalai Lama, right? Like it is absolutely the hardest thing to get right. And most of us get it kind of right. It's hard.
And there's such a level of faith and trust, isn't there? That look, what I'm doing now, it's tears for everyone involved, but 10 years, 20 years down the track, this is the right decision.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm adamant about saying, tell me the truth. I draw very hard lines. And if they cross those lines, the hammer comes down on the toe because I want them to understand what a real boundary is. I draw boundaries around morals, ethics, and safety, right? Everything else, okay, buddy, you messed up, right? I'm not going to come down with a hammer, but I need them to understand where dad gets pissed because dad is responsible for keeping them alive. Right. And making them be good people. The rest of it is just squishy. Right. We're all learning. We're all growing.
Yeah. I like this idea of, providing the emotional safety, but then within that, they need to feel every single consequence of their decisions. Like if they make a certain decision, they need to understand the relationship between outcomes. Like if I ask you to do something and then you don't do it and we've had a conversation and you know better, then cool, you already know what you can go and administer the outcome, the consequence yourself, rather than me needing to come down. My job is not to raise my voice. It's not to punish. My job is to make sure that you are equipped to make good decisions. In life. That's the way that I think about it.
I think that is probably the healthiest operating system we can have, right? Daniel Amen really got me into the parenting with love and logic, body of work. And early parenting, I mean, honestly, we joke about it now and be like, this is the land of empty threats. If I'm going to count to 10, and if you don't do this, I'm going to count to 10 again, right? And you're like, oh God, this isn't working, right? And so we had to just kind of update and just be like, wow, we really kind of suck at this. So I'm going to count to 3. And your iPad, your whatever is gone. You signed up for this deal. We agreed to this. Done. Consequence. No yelling, no anger, no screaming. And now they're great children, right? But like there's an art to this. There's a way to do this better.
I've had conversations with other parents who are quite happy to yell at their kids if something goes wrong. And the way that we run these things, like the way that we parent our children is the way that they're going to learn to solve their own problems. And I don't want to be yelled at ever in any situation. It's something that makes me instantly stressed. It really pisses me off and brings out the absolute worst in me. If I yell at my kids, all I'm doing is teaching them that they can yell to solve their problems. And of course, I have bad days where I raise my voice and I shouldn't and everything else. But I'm more than ever, I'm just so focused. At the moment I have raised my voice, I know that it's my stress that I haven't taken care of rather than the children's issue. There is no problem they can face short of running on the road if there is a car coming that I need to yell to get the outcome for.
I wish I had that. And my parents are a little different. Like my wife, God bless her, she, so Middle Easterns, right? And I'll start with a different example because I don't want to pick on my wife. But like when I first got into practice, I was working with the Israeli special forces guy who was a chiropractor who was in our office, and people would visit me and just be like, "Whoa, what's going on in there?" I'm like, "Oh, nothing. That's his cousin. He's visiting. They're saying hi." And it sounded like a war was going on because they're just shouty people. Right. And my wife grew up in this very shouty Iranian, like, bah, 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 they're very loud. And so I'm like, whoa, 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 what's all this yelling about? And so my wife had it imprinted from her mother and her mother and her mother. And now I'm watching this kind of generational imprinting of like shouty people in my household where I didn't really grow up in a shouty household where I'm like, ugh. And so I'm trying to intercept this and be like, we don't need to raise our voice. And it's thousands of years, not just one generation, but thousands of years of momentum for a shouty culture. And they love their children. They're just shouty. And so I'm like, oh shit. Okay. Well, that's where my meditation led me now, right? Like, let's work on this.
I'm really interested in your daily routine. Are there any really specific parts that you do, rituals to make the most out of the morning or to help your morning set the tone for the rest of the day?
Yeah, that's a big part of my life, right? Is I really need to fold inward while I'm in the still water, because Lord knows when the kids' alarms go off and the dogs start wagging their tails, it's like you're in the whitewater and you could be in the whitewater till bedtime. Right. And so my still water practice is I'll do about half an hour to an hour of Qigong every morning. It's dark. The dogs know, they just say hi and they lie back down. And then I meditate for 15 minutes. Then I go put on a pot of coffee, kiss the kids, wake up, wake up, wake up. I take the dogs to the park, let them do their business while I listen to the birds chirp and the sun rise. And now daddy's ready every day. And if I'm traveling, I just got to get it in somewhere. And then the rest of the day, I have one more Qigong. I have a 5-part, what I call gong, 100 days. Today's day 50. Literally, I have 2 parts of the gong to still do. And then day 50 is done. I have 50 more days. If I fail, I start over. And I consistently upgrade my gs and shift them based on where I'm at in life. Right. And so I have another Qigong and I have to work out. And so the day is young. I will finish that and I'll be on day 50. But I found that I just don't need to be working out before 7 a.m. My body loves working out at 11. So why am I forcing it? I like to just start my day that way. do a few, most critical calls and, important brain stuff, then take a break, push around some weights, sweat, and then jump in the sauna, shower, shave, whatever, and then do like my media stuff with a clean face and, eat at that point and then go back. But then a little bit of a deceleration ritual in the evening as well. No coffee after 2 p.m. unless you're, at a wedding or something, right? And just kind of setting the tone for the morning, starting with stillness and then drinking a cup of coffee, getting into the white water, handling it, working out, burning off some of that cortisol, eating good amount of protein throughout the day, and then having a sustained flow until, 4:30, the kids are home. I don't want to be the guy that's like, shut up, I'm working, right? I got to tighten my day up a little bit because they're here for 10 more years and then they're off to college and doing stuff. I want to know them, right? And so I get much more efficient to get my stuff done. And I get a lot of stuff done in those hours so that then I could be the dad and the dog owner and the husband that the rest of them deserve.
Yeah. It's so good. If you're having a really tough day, maybe you've got a sick kid that forces you to be up and running before you have a chance to go and do that whole ritual, that whole process that you mentioned there. Is there something that you can do later in the day when you do get a few minutes to yourself to instantly snap out of negative energy?
Depends on the day, to be honest. Right. I think a lot of people are into their miracle cure, like follow the Pedram system. This works for everything. You know what I mean? Like there's just so much BS out there. I think it depends on the day, depends on the circumstance. It depends on if they barfed on my face or not. Right. Like there's, you have a certain amount of fuse length that had to do with last night's sleep, last week's sleep, how your spouse kissed you goodnight, like all of it that goes into that math, right? And so I will consistently work to lengthen my fuse because I don't know when the next kid barfs on me, right? And so it really depends on saying, okay, you know what? I need a minute. And sometimes it looks like lying down like a mummy, like somewhere and just closing my eyes and just being like, I need to take a 20-minute nap, set a 20-minute timer and just go down. Other times it's like, okay, this guy needs to go take a walk. It depends on, like, I always ask my body what I need and then give the body what it tells me it needs, my body, brain, all, this whole thing. What do you need right now? And then I self-medicate with whatever the healthy thing is that the body is asking for. And sometimes it's just food, right? Like I'll find that if I'm low on sleep, I'm wearing my wedding ring right now, but like my Oura ring and all the gadgets, right, that are helpful, I will find definitively that if I have a couple bad nights sleep, a dog is sick or, whatever life, that the next day it's much harder to maintain stable blood sugar and mood because my sleep tank was low and therefore I'm like, I need more calories to keep the same brain waves going. And so feed it, right? And so there's ways to adjust for it when you check in and be like, what am I feeling right now? What's going on with my body?
I want to make sure, and I know you've already touched on some of this already, but can you share a little bit of an overview about some of the work that you're doing today that you're most excited about?
Thank you for that. I'm in the process of writing a new book. And it's been 2 years of research and just looking at the literature. And I'm doing a 150-person clinical trial where we're checking blood, saliva, secretory IgA, heart rate variability, all sorts of markers showing that this multiceptual patterning of bringing attention, folding it back, actually pulls on some very major dials for our mental and physical health. And how it is all tied together. If you bring more awareness to the system switches on. And to the point where it's like, I'm now looking at this data of like hormetic stressors, like sauna and cold plunge, all this stuff being like, wait a minute, is it the actual cold plunge that's creating the epigenetic expression? Or is it the pain, the focus on the breath and the hyper aware focus on your body that's triggering the anterior cingulate cortex to pull on this master switch? And so there's some really interesting, I'm working with neurologists and
so you could get the same benefit without having to do the act.
Yeah.
Or you do the breathing act, but not having to go and track
down. But is it the
plunge.
Awareness or is it the thing? Like, do I have to smack myself in the face to feel pain, or can I just feel sensation on my face if I can focus in on it? But most of us need extreme pain because we're extremely gone, right? And so that's become a big thing. And what I've done is I've kind of reverse engineered all my Taoist practices and being like, look, the old man taught me this. It works. Everyone I show it to is like, holy crap, what was that? I feel amazing. And I'm like, okay, so now we have this empirical body of evidence that this, whatever it is, works. Now let's look at what we're doing. Oh, you're circling your hands on the periphery. You're going from peripheral vision to focused vision and back. What is that? And so I have means. So I just call neuroscientists and be like, hey, can you help with this? And like, oh, that's really fascinating. And so it's like we're advancing this body of work based on saying, we know this works. Now let's look at it the other way around instead of like, how do we solve anxiety? Right? Like we have answers. Now let's fill in the science.
Mm-hmm. And for someone who's really serious about getting their health back on track or living their best life from a health perspective, what's the very first thing they should do?
I would say there's two things you should do is immediately avoid environmental toxins. So get out of an unsafe home, unsafe environment, unsafe chemicals that are triggering your body to go into neuroceptive, like I'm not safe. And the next dial, and this is the meditation guy saying this, the next dial is get your gut barrier tested, find whatever foods you're sensitive to. It's like a couple $300 test. Stop eating those foods, fix your gut barrier. And then all your mind-body practices take on a lot more meaning and you're capable of doing them because your body isn't screaming, help, I don't feel safe. So it's really hard to meditate off. It's like pulling down a smoke alarm and saying, shut up, I'm trying to meditate, instead of being like, where's the fire? Put out the fires. I've learned that the hard way, being in functional medicine, being monk guy and functional medicine guy, is put out the fires, and then the monk stuff just is kind of our natural state.
Yeah, we often talk about emotional safety, but physical safety through the foods that you're eating. So important.
Well, which also creates emotional dysregulation and the gut brain, like it's all connected. But if I continually poison myself and wonder why I don't feel well, duh.
And last question before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
I would write the same thing I tell myself all the time. It's just two words, I am. Because it takes all the adjectives, all the self-definition and all of it, and it opens me up to the realm of the eternal. And it reminds me of the eternal essence of who we are.
I love that. Let's now move into the Win the Day Rocket Round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one, Pedram?
Let's go.
Number one, what quote inspires you the most?
The basic difference between an ordinary man and a warrior is that the warrior sees everything as a challenge, whereas the ordinary man sees everything as either a blessing or a curse.
So good. Number two, morning coffee or evening wine?
Morning coffee.
Number three, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Slow down and savor. You're not going to feel like this in 20 years.
Number four, what book do you gift the most or that contributed most to the mindset you have today?
The Secret of the Golden Flower, translation by Thomas Cleary.
Any particular lesson?
It has a lot to do with folding the attention inward and becoming aware of your awareness. And it is one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and I read a lot.
Number five, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
Too many to speak of. Yeah. The vulnerability of becoming a spiritual person and overstepping or sidestepping the traumatic past of an immigrant child who lost a lot of family. And now like I have a spiritual identity and this is the new me without all the healing. Doesn't work that way.
Number six, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
It's your greatest teacher.
Number seven, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
Someone alive today. I would still sit with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama.
Number eight, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
Google Calendar.
It's good, isn't it? I use Google Calendar.
It just keeps me honest.
Yeah. As long as it's in the calendar, it gets done.
Yeah, that's it. This is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Otherwise, we never would have found each other.
That's it.
Number nine, share one thing on your bucket list.
Skiing with paragliding together.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I look at those and I'm like, man, you shouldn't have had kids. Now you gotta wait till they can wipe their own butts.
Yeah.
But I'm an elite skier, and flying and skiing together seems like kind of an obvious combo.
Closest thing to heaven you can get.
That's it.
Last question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
Every single day, I start my day putting in dedicated acts of self-love. I feed this meter first so that I could be the person they need me to be in my family and my life.
Great way to finish. There are a bunch of ways to connect with Pedram. We'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow him on Instagram at Dr. Pedram Shojai. Visit his website, theurbanmonk.com, and grab a copy of his many books on Amazon. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Pedram, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.